Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to your Lunch Break Live. My name is Yvonne Harincue if you're new here, and if you're not, thank you for coming back. Today is April the 13th. It is Wednesday, and today we are talking a little bit more about those laws that were passed by Governor Ivey on Friday that many people are calling anti-LGBTQ+. Now, yesterday we spoke with the state's only openly gay member of the Alabama legislature, and today we're going to talk a little bit more about the economic impact of these new laws. So today I am joined by AL.com reporter John Sharp. John actually met with the governor yesterday at a separate event and was able to ask her about her thoughts on the economic impact of these laws, and specifically if they will slow down the economic growth in the state of Alabama. So, John, we have a lot to talk about. There's a lot to break down here. But I think that we should start off with just what you asked Governor Ivey yesterday and what her response was.
Yeah, specifically, we asked whether or not there's any concerns about a prospective economic fallout from the approval of the legislation at the last minute in the end of the session last week. HB 32, in particular, would be Alabama's version of the bathroom bill. It's been passed in other states, notably North Carolina, and rescinded in North Carolina, but it was passed at first time in North Carolina in 2016. And then the amendment that was added to that particular bill, which with regards to restrictions on what can be taught in schools, critics call it the "Don't Say Gay" amendment that is patterned after similar legislation in Florida that's gotten a lot of national attention in recent weeks. That was the first bill. The second bill was the medical bill, which would make it a felony punishable by up to 10 years in prison for any medical practitioner or anyone that prescribes puberty blocking medications. So those were the two bills that were passed and signed into law at the last part of session, kind of got a lot of attention here in Alabama. So the governor comes to Mobile yesterday, and we had she was here for an event. It was an event at a logistics park announcing the relocation of two firms to this evolving business facility. And the governor touted, she was here to tout Alabama business, its economy, how the state's leading the way, so on and so forth. So afterwards, we got a chance to ask her whether or not there could be any blowback to that momentum as a result of the passage of these two pieces of legislation. And the reason why we asked that question is because in other states, you've had this before. You had it in North Carolina. You had PayPal announced that they were no longer expanding as a result of that bathroom bill that was passed in 2016. You've had other corporations come out and say that they're opposed to these type of bills. In particular, the Human Rights Council has said that there's over 200. They got a letter that's signed by over 200 companies saying that they don't support these measures. So yeah, there's some potential economic issues that are there. So we asked her that question. Her response was essentially. She's not there to talk politics. She's in Mobile to talk about business at the time. That was yesterday, and then clearly defended the passage of these bills. And that's kind of where we're at with that right now. I did follow up with a conversation with Representative Neil Rafferty shortly after he was on your show yesterday, and we discussed this very issue as well. And his comment, was kind of interesting. He's a little frustrated, and his comment was that, well, hey, where's we're not hearing anything. It's radio silence was his term from the business community. He said in their defense, some of this stuff popped up at the last minute. So, there wasn't any time to come out and say for a company to say, hey, look, we're potentially not going to do this expansion project, or we're not going to do this, and that as a result of this bill being passed. But, so he said that the timing might have been a factor, but in essence, he's also saying that there wasn't any groundswell of opposition from the business community about any of this legislation that's been out there for a while. It's no secret that for instance, the medical bill has been out there for 3 years now. It's been introduced in the legislature for 3 years, and there hasn't been a groundswell of opposition from the business community on that either. So.
Right, and we have all, I think, been following what has been happening in Florida with the law that is now called the Don't Say Gay law, or what people refer to as the Don't Say Gay law. There, again, you mentioned that an amendment to one of the laws that passed and was signed into law on Friday by Governor Ivey has an amendment that really mimics that legislation in Florida. You look at Florida, though, and you have seen several companies, including the Walt Disney Company, say that this was a priority of theirs to fight back against that legislation, against that law. But you come to Alabama, and granted, it has been less than a week since these bills became law. So the time frame is definitely a lot smaller at this point than it has been in Florida. But at this point, have we seen any large scale companies, particularly those that are headquartered in Alabama, make any kind of statement or say that they don't want to do business, they don't want to expand in Alabama because of these laws that are viewed as anti LGBTQ?
No, none publicly. And that's where Representative Rafferty comes with his radio silence comment. There has not been any groundswell publicly. And I checked with a couple of our tourism officials. I checked with the state tourism director, and they haven't gotten any indication, any reaction whatsoever from this legislation, from the passage of both legislations. And I even checked with the Greater Birmingham Convention and Visitors Bureau, on whether or not they've received any kind of feedback as well, and they have not. So yeah, it has been radio silence in Alabama. One of the key things of note, one of the interesting things is some of this could have to do with the fact that Alabama is not alone right now in pushing these bills forward. According again to the Human Rights Council, they're tracking 320 bills that they view as anti-LGBTQ, including 140 that directly target transgender people, and approximately 75 that would ban trans youth from participating in school sports consistent with their gender identity. We had one of those bills passed last year as well, and there was no repercussions from that. There had been some discussions on whether or not that could affect the World Games in Birmingham, whether or not the NCAA might weigh in on it, but there was nothing that came out of any of that.
Since the passage of these two new laws, again signed into law on Friday, this is that one law that prohibits transgender minors from receiving medical care, gender affirming medical care, and the second one has several different components, but really focuses on conversations around gender and sexuality in schools, particularly K through 5, and then also that bathroom bill that requires students to use the bathroom that corresponds with the sex on their birth certificate. Those two laws that were passed on Friday. Have we heard anything from the World Games as to those two bills? I know you mentioned some other ones that have passed before in Alabama, but have they made any type of comment in the past several days?
No, publicly, I haven't seen anything, and again, I have not been tracking the World Games directly, so I wouldn't know, whether or not there's any, concerns with any athletes or anybody who might be coming to the state. Now, the World Games will be held in July, so it's a little bit, a few months away. But yeah, right now, this is still fairly fresh, and we have not heard anything in particular, at least publicly.
Well, and again, John, you just mentioned it's still fresh. This is still early. When you look at Florida, when you look at North Carolina, some of those other fallouts, that economic fallout that happened in those other states, how long did it take for that to happen? Did it happen within several days of these bills becoming law, or did it take a little bit longer to set in and for these companies to kind of come up with an action plan?
Yeah, with North Carolina, got all the attention because they were the first, and that was back in 2016. And the fallout was noisy and it was fairly rapid. I don't know if it was done within several days, but within a year, the bill was repealed, and it was replaced with a toned down version of the bathroom bill. And the critics of the original bill felt like even the amended bill didn't go far enough to remove the original intent of the of the restrictions for public restroom use. But there was a huge fault. The Associated Press did a report in North Carolina that showed that the due to the passage of that particular piece of legislation, the fallout could have been $3.7 billion of lost business over the period of 12 years. It's a lot of money. That's a lot of business loss, and also the NCAA and the NBA. The NBA moved their All-Star game that year from Charlotte, North Carolina, to New Orleans. So there was some professional sports that we don't have here in Alabama that certainly made some impact there in North Carolina with regards to what they did, and it also had a political fallout. There was the governor basically he lost his election a few years later in particular in that state. And from what I've read, had largely to do with the passage of that particular piece of legislation, the fallout from it. So there was a big deal in North Carolina regarding that bill that we have not even hinted at here in Alabama. Now, again, North Carolina is more of a purple state. It's not as Republican as Alabama is. It is historically a conservative state, but it's not anywhere close to what, where Alabama is a supermajority Republican. All the statewide elected office holders are Republican. So there is some political hedging here in this state with regards to pursuing these pieces of legislation, which other states might not have with regards to.
Well, you bring up a good point, though. This is an election year. If Alabama voters feel very strongly that they disagree with these bills, and this is their chance to change that by the people they elect. So we have to always bring it back there that these people are in their offices because they are elected to them. And again, it is an election year. Governor Kay Ivey is up for re-election this year as well. Now, John, we talked a little bit about that political fallout, but I think you bring up a good point when talking about the NBA, PayPal, these other large companies. Alabama might be in a different position than some of these states because we do not have these big professional sports teams. We do not have an NFL team, an NBA team. We do have a G League team, and at least in Birmingham. We have some minor league baseball teams, several throughout Alabama, but we don't have any of those big name teams, at least professionally. We do have the college teams. We don't have those pro teams. We also don't have a Walt Disney, a PayPal. So what are the companies here that you think would be the ones that people are looking for to make a stand?
Well, I'm not going to name any particular because I don't know where they stand, but I do know that there's some in the Birmingham area, some of our large banks, financial institutions, and perhaps the NCAA as well. I mean, they have a huge role in this state. But there's several institutions, especially in the Birmingham area, that I think there's some folks that are waiting to see if they're going to come out and make some comments. They have, clearly they have internal programs within their, within their structure of the company in which they promote inclusion and diversity within their corporate structures. And I think that there would be some interest in seeing whether or not they might come out and make a public statement or not. But again, we haven't heard anything right now. I don't think it's unique to Alabama. I think this is nationwide. Again, all these bills have been introduced. It's going on throughout the country, and the Human Rights Council's tracking a lot of this stuff here in the United States. And the only thing I've seen from a business side of things, from the business community, is this letter that's been signed, and it's been signed by a lot of your corporate brands throughout the country that oppose these bills. But there is no indication that these companies will relocate outside of the states that they're in. So, for instance, you're not going to see a big box store uprooting all its stores in Alabama as a result of this. There has been no indication that might happen, and if it did, that would have a huge impact. But again, there has been absolutely no indication that that's in the offering.
Well, and I thought that it was interesting as well. Something that Representative Rafferty told you yesterday afternoon was that in June, Pride Month, we will see so many of these businesses change their logos on social media or send statements saying that they support the LGBTQ plus community, change their logos again to a rainbow flag or some type of sign to stand in solidarity with that community. But then he said, in April, where were you? Or he said that is what he will be thinking in the summer when Pride Month rolls around. So just something interesting to think about, John. And I know that that you and everybody else will be kind of asking those same questions this summer if we do get that response from companies as well.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see because that is right around the corner. Pride Month is not too far away, and we do see it every year that the logos are changed on Facebook and on Twitter and marketing materials as well. So time will tell to see what the fallout will be on that.
John, very interesting reporting here, just kind of a different angle to the story that we've all been talking about for several days. We're going to link it here for people to read if they have not caught up on it yet. Otherwise, John, thanks so much for explaining this. Everybody watching, thanks so much. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.